No, you don't actually have a right to a trial. You don't actually have a right to know what the charges are against you. And more specifically, if you've come into the United States and just happen to be present in the United States, no, you don't have a right to a hearing or your time in court before you get deported. Now, I've seen a bunch of people in the comments talking about stuff about how everyone has the right to a trial, everyone has a right to, to use the courts, and that we can't just deport people without a trial, without them being able to stand before court. And you're wrong. You're just wrong. Legally, constitutionally, we're going to go into the Constitution. We're going to read what the Constitution actually says. We're going to talk about the legal standing, and we're going to show whereas the Supreme Court has suspended temporarily the execution of the Alien Enemies Act, we're going to find that the Aliens Enemy Act is not some aberration of United States law. We're going to look at precedents in the Civil War and what happened. Abraham Lincoln said, no, you don't have a right to a trial. No, you don't have a right to know what we're charging you with. We can just detain you indefinitely without a trial. And Congress went, yeah, okay. The Supreme Court and the courts of the United States went, yeah, that's right. You can do that. And how is that different than today? We're going to talk about all those things. It's a lot of information we need to cover. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Poplar Report. I'm Steve Poplar. I'm an accountant by trade. I'm not a lawyer, but I am going to show you some things that may shock and shake your world. I don't know. But certainly will equip you in conversating with other people around you. So you'll be equipped for those conversations. Let's dive in. All right, so earlier this year, President Trump declared an invasion that specifically Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan prison gang that has committed many crimes in the United States and was taking over apartment buildings and such, he declared it an invasion. Now, he has since expanded just from Tren de Aragua to other organizations that he has, cartels that he has declared to be terrorist organizations that have invaded the United States. Now, it's very important that he used the term invasion, and we'll see why in just a second. Now, a lot of people will take that and go straight towards the Alien Enemies Act, which is being used, a 1700s law that says basically that we can deport people who are enemies of the state. Now, why this invasion thing is so important, let me just read this little clause out of the Constitution. Article 1, Section 9, Clause 2. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, which is the right to know what you're being charged with, and the right to stand trial, to defend yourself. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. Okay, except it goes on. Unless, when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Right there in the Constitution, it says that it can be suspended. Now, suspended doesn't mean canceled, doesn't mean forever. It means for a time. Public safety may require it. Now, is that happening in the United States? President Trump is saying yes, that public safety is requiring it, and that an invasion has occurred. Now, the Alien Enemies Act is a whole nother ball of wax, but basically what it attempted to do was to explain more in depth basically the ability of the United States government under the President of the United States to immediately deport those who are enemies. And then we have on the White House website, we have their explanation of what exactly that means. But let me just read a couple tiny little bits here. Now this is the law of the land. This has not been suspended. This has not been repealed by Congress, but rather continues to be. When an alien who becomes liable as an enemy in the manner prescribed in the previous section is not chargeable with actual hostility or other crime against public safety, says that he should, he should have time to basically get out of the country. But the president may ascertain and declare such reasonable time as may be consistent with the public safety. So if you're not actually engaging in hostility, but you're still not supposed to be here, you need to leave. But when it comes to those who are actively engaged in hostilities, those who are members of these terrorist organizations, whenever there is a declared war between the United States and any foreign nation or government. Now, government doesn't necessarily have to be a country's government. Okay, this is the 1700s, right? So an organization can have a government. But it also continues and says, or any invasion or predatory incursion. So invasion, that word used there again, does not say by an invasion by a foreign government, or a foreign nation. Doesn't say that. It says foreign nation, government, or invasion. Any invasion. It's pretty open right there. Is perpetrated, actually happened, or attempted, or threatened against the territory of the United States by any foreign nation or government. And the president makes a public proclamation. That's where we got that public proclamation. Of the event, all natives, citizens, denizens, or subjects of the hostile nation or government, which can be a cartel, it can be an organization, being of the age of 14 years and upward. So you can't do that to children, but as long as they're 14 years or older, who shall be within the United States and not actually naturalized, shall be liable to be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed. Where does it say in there about a court? Where does it say that there should be opportunity for them to stand before a judge, have these rights? And then you go back to the Constitution, which makes this abundantly clear: the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion. These courts that are ruling that these guys getting sent down to El Salvador, who are MS-13, Tren de Aragua, other terrorist organizations, saying that they have a right to have a trial, and I'm hearing a lot of Americans repeating this too. No, the law is clear. No, they do not. Not only that, I'm going to go one further and say there's precedent where the President of the United States can just flat out, in the case of rebellion, suspend habeas corpus as well. Again, habeas corpus. Your right to be told what you're being charged with. Now, we're all used to this, right? You can't, am I being detained? why am I being detained? And they're supposed to tell you what you're being charged with. Then in addition to that, now they don't have to do that immediately necessarily, but they do have to do that relatively quickly or they have to release you. Then you have a right to a trial, right? Now in the United States you can be held for years before you get your trial, but in 1861, you know what happened that year? The Civil War started. President Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. He made a decree and suspended habeas corpus first in the state of Maryland, later extended it all the way to Philadelphia, and so basically from Philadelphia down to Washington, D.C., that whole corridor, habeas corpus was suspended. Now this was so that he could get Union troops and supplies to the Union Army, and he was arresting people who were trying to attack the supply lines, and they were trying to sabotage the rail network. They were trying to sabotage the wagons, horses, and he was arresting people and not charging them with the crimes. He was not giving them their day in court. He was just detaining them. Now, in 1863, Congress passed a law giving the president the authority to suspend habeas corpus nationwide until the end of the Civil War. And President Lincoln did that very thing. He did expand habeas corpus nationwide. They basically suspended habeas corpus throughout the entire state of Kentucky. I know this is the stuff that all these people out there shouting and screaming and holding little placards up and have the Democratic congressman running down to El Salvador to go protect this guy's rights. He doesn't have the right of habeas corpus. One, because it can be suspended, and two, I mean it's not exactly a right. I mean we know that that in the extreme situations, the law can allow the President of the United States to address those issues. And we've seen that. World War II. Other people were detained. Now, you may agree with that. Most of you are almost certainly going to disagree with that. And I kind of lean towards the disagreed side of things. But in the event of a war or threat of invasion, you do what you got to do. Now, we have somewhere between 20 and 30 million people inside the United States that don't have the permission to be in the United States. And we need most of those people to leave. We had about 10 million of them in the last 4 years come into the U.S. 10 million. This wasn't some accident. It didn't just happen. It was intentional. Billions and billions of dollars were spent bringing those people into the United States. It was an invasion. Now, we have the criminal gangs, organizations, these terrorist organizations. That's one thing. Now, do the rest of the people who are peaceful inside the United States, not committing violent crimes, do they have the right for appeals and court cases? It would seem that because they're not part of the invasion, that yes, at this point they do. Now, could President Trump indicate that they are part of an invasion? That I think would be more murky. But then I think, like I said, the Alien Enemies Act does have Section 22 that they are not chargeable with actual hostility or other crime against public safety. Now, that's one of the reasons why we've seen a bunch of these where they've been going after people with crimes. because that seems to apply here too. The Constitution suggests that habeas corpus can be suspended, but exactly how that happens, the mechanism of that, was in doubt. And that's why in the Civil War, Congress actually authorized the president to suspend habeas corpus 2 years after he suspended habeas corpus. He went ahead and did it, but then Congress is kind of like, well, president shouldn't just be allowed to do that whenever they feel like it. So we should kind of set the precedent that Congress kind of has to authorize the president to suspend habeas corpus. And so in order to kind of retain legislative authority, they try to do that. But we've had a couple of lower courts who ruled essentially that after the Civil War expired, that the writ of habeas corpus was back in force, and that the president was not authorized by Congress anymore to continue suspending habeas corpus. Now, Johnson lifted habeas corpus, lifted the suspension of habeas corpus when he was president. And since then, we haven't had an official suspension of habeas corpus even till to this day. Now, the question is that sort of what President Trump is doing? And the answer to that is maybe, possibly. He doesn't want to actually say the suspension of that. But as these court cases go forward, we may see the White House their legal teams actually present that type of defense. And it will be interesting to see how they are justifying what they're doing legally. But there are clear boundaries and borders on some of these things. A lot of the other stuff remains kind of fuzzy. What exactly? Who exactly? We'll see. Now, just to kind of put this in perspective, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people, and the media is losing their minds. But I think it's important to put this in perspective of President Barack Hussein Obama deported 3 million people during his presidency. 3 million people. That's a lot more than President Trump has deported. A lot more. If President Trump deported 3 million people, it would be like the end of the world, according to the media. President Bush did even more. He deported 10.3 million people during his presidency. Now, if we have somewhere between 20 and 30 million who do not have legal status here in the U.S., that would put a pretty big dent in that. Now, of course, President Bush had 4 years plus 4 years, right? 8 years. President Trump only has 4 remaining years. But even more than that, President Clinton did better than either of the presidents. 12.3 million people deported during the Clinton administration. If President Trump gets anywhere near that, I think everyone would say that was a massive win. But the fact that we have Democrats who have deported millions more than President Trump, and yet that same party is now crying like as if the sky is falling, is truly disingenuous. All right, friends, I hope that this was helpful in just outlining some of the legal ideas and some of the laws and the Constitution related to this. Pop down in the comments down below and let me know other things, other laws, other considerations. If you have court cases and stuff like that, maybe we can all learn together here. I appreciate all of you guys participating in this community, and hopefully you guys have a happy Easter. That's when this video is dropping, but hopefully this is useful going forward for folks as well. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to check out another video from this channel, there's one right up here. I'll see you over there, or I'll see you guys later. Steve Poplar of the Poplar Report out.